Hello and welcome. Today on phpdemy, we'll learn how to build a mini PHP MVC framework. What is a PHP MVC framework? A PHP MVC framework is a web application design pattern that divides the application logic into three interconnected components, which are the model, the view, and the controller. What are the functions of these components? The model, it handles all the interactions between the application and the database. The view, it is responsible for presenting the user interface of the application. The controller serves as the intermediary between the model and the view. So now that we've understood what PHP MVC framework is and the components that makes up a framework, let's look at how our application is structured internally. Here is an illustration of our project. We have the root folder, which is called the Mini MVC framework. And then within our root folder, we have two additional folders. We have the app and then the public. The public folder is the folder that is going to be accessible to the web. It holds all of our static files and directories. Also, we have two additional files within our root directory. We have the .htaccess file and the index.php file. So let's go ahead and start creating files and directories for our project. Two prerequisites we have to consider for these projects are: 1. A local server. I will be working with XAMPP, so I'll go ahead and start Apache and then also start MySQL. And then the code editor that I'll be working with is the VS Code. So let's get started. First and foremost, creating our app directory. Already I have opened my root directory. As you can see, it's an MVC framework. Then I also create the public directory, and then I will go ahead and create the .htaccess file, and then I'll paste this code in there. This is a rewrite engine on code. So it turns on the engine to rewrite or redirect all of our requested files and directories to the index.php page. So let's go ahead and create our index.php. Also, the index.php, I am going to add a few lines of comments. So I'll say this comment is just to guide us how to go about our projects. So we have compiled classes and required files are initiated here. Okay, this look good. Next, we're going to add a comment for session. So this is where we are going to initiate our session. Next is going to be loading our vendor files. That is our auto load vendors, like our PHP mailer will be loaded there. And we have here we are going to create instance of our app, and then finally we are going to run our app here. So now that we are done with the root, let's go into our app directory, and then we create our component folders. So we have the controllers, we have the models, we have the views, and then finally we are going to add one other directory, which is called the core. The core will serve as the engine house of our application because it's going to hold several classes. One very important one is going to be the route. So we'll go ahead now and create the routing, which I call the app. So we'll start by declaring our PHP opening tag, and then we have the class, and I will say the app class serves as the main application controller because we are going to see the properties that are contained, which are going to be the controller, the method, the params in just a moment. And then each of these properties handles the incoming requests after it has been distributed among them, depending on how the URL is being received or retrieved. So we have a private property called controller, And then this private property, this controller is set to our default controller, and then it's going to hold the name home. And then we also have another default, which is going to be the method, and then the default method is going to be set to index. And then finally we have another private property that is called params, which we hold an initial value of null, which can later hold an array of parameters extracted from the URL. So how do we extract an array from the URL? To do this, let's create a private function, a private method called SA split URL. This split URL is going to have a variable called URL, and then this variable URL is going to use a super global array get. So we say a super global array get that has a parameter value URL. That has a parameter value URL. So this is basically saying that we're using the super global array get to grab whatever is given in our URL in our browser, and then when we get that, when we are able to grab that, we now split it using our explode function. So we use the explode function to split. We say filter var, then we trim the URL, and then we set a delimiter, and then we sanitize our URL. After splitting what we have gotten, then we return URL. The next step is creating a public method called run. So the public method run is going to be the entry point of our application, and is responsible for routing requests to the appropriate controller or method, and as well as passing any parameters. So to do this, we are going to call the split function. So we say we declare a variable here. Variable is equal to this split URL. Okay, I misspelled it up here. We have a split URL. So we have called our function which returns an array that is representing the URL segment. So now that we have gotten our segmented URL, let's begin to distribute them among the controllers, the methods, and then the params. So we say for controller, let's give it so we'll say select controller, or let's just say controllers. We say file name is equal to the location where the controller resides. So we have the controllers are going to reside in app and then controller here. So we say app slash controllers, then slash, then we concatenate so that any part of the first part of our returned array as the URL will be assigned to the controller. So since we're dealing with the first part, let's or before that, let's check out something so that we have a better understanding of what we're doing. So we just pause here and go back to here, and let's instantiate our app. So we have app is equals to new app, and then we can run our app this way. We say app run. Also, we need to find a way to include all of our classes in the index.php file. So to do this, we are going to create a new file in our app directory. So we have bootstrap I was going to put .com .php. If you look at our application structure, we also have a file here called bootstrap.php. So this bootstrap.php is going to be the file that serves as an intermediary between our secured folder and then the public folder. So let's auto load core libraries. So to do this, we want to dynamically load every class that is found in the core library. So we say SPL underscore auto load register. So let's close this and then come in here and say we have a function. So we say function. This function is going to have a parameter class name, and if the class name is found, then we should require once core, and then we concatenate class name, and then we add our PHP extension. So with this line of code, we have here we come here and then we require bootstrap. So we say bootstrap. So we have it in app bootstrap. Now with that, we have dynamically included our routes, so we can actually be able to begin to see what we have done so far. So let's just do a var dump. So let's say a var dump of then we'll print, let's print R, and there's this here. So let's take a look. So let's check it out and see. So we have localhost, so it's actually working. Now what we have here is that it didn't find anything to return. So the first segment of our array is empty, but once we have home, that error goes away and then it returns home. Also, to fix this, because the array key, which is this, didn't find anything, and we have a warning that it's undefined. So to fix this, we go back to our code, and then on line 12 we just add this, and then we are good. So this is saying that go out there, go grab something, but if you don't find anything, then grab this one and return home. So now once we refresh, it's gone, even without adding anything to our URL in the browser. So since it didn't find anything, it falls back to home. So let's just make this small later to look more of a URL. So by the time now we have let's say post/news/article, now it's going to bring out the different segment. Now this is what we did here. We said when you go out, whatever you grab, bring it home, and then we'll share it among your siblings. So the exploit here is actually doing just that. So this is what it got, and then it has splitted them into segments. So the first one, which is 0, is going to post, which is the controller in this instance. Then the second segment is the news, which is the method, and then the third one is the article, which is going to be around. So you could even have numbers and so on and so forth. So with this, we can just comment this out and then we'll proceed. So as we initially have started doing before we try to make more clarification on our URL, we have our controller. Now we're trying to select for controllers. So we have our file names. Where does our controller reside? They reside in app. Inside of app, they reside in the controllers folder. Once you're in the controllers, then you'll locate the first URL, and then we concatenate and then add our extension. Now before we proceed, there is something that we need to do. If you look at the app class here, the class name tallies with the file name. So what we did here is that what has been returned from the split URL method, which is being called here, the first segment of it is being assigned to our controllers. So whatever is the first segment of the array that has been gotten matches the name of the controller. So it is advisable that both the controller class and the controller file name should be the same. And since we are always capitalizing the class name, the file name will also be capitalized. So to achieve this, we use a PHP function called use first, and then we close. So with this, the file name and the class name will be matched, and then our controllers can be easily be identified and assigned their respective URL. Now we check if this class name or this file name exists. So we say if file exists, file name, then let's require file name. Hence, this controller is equal to use first URL. So whatever controller that is found here, then it should be set to this if it exists, and then we unset it. Now what we have done here is perfect, is good, but in a situation where a controller does not exist, what happens then? We will run into troubles perhaps, because it will not be nice for our visitors to see blank pages on our websites or on our web apps. So what we're going to do here is we are going to include a not found page. So we say file name is equal to, we have also going to reside in the controller folder, and the file name is going to be underscore 404.php. Now we can require this file, and then we can set the particular controller to 404. Now this is how we assigned the first segment of our URL to any controller that does exist in our application. The next we're going to work on is the method. So we have a method. So after determining the controller, that is after we have gotten the controller from here, if it does exist, then we will create an instance of that controller object. So we say controller is equal to new controller. So it is from here that we begin to work on the method, because if the URL contains a second segment, then it should be assigned to the method. So what we'll do here is, first of all, we will check if the URL contains a second segment, and then we will know. So we'll say if not empty, then it's URL second. Remember, 0 is 1 in an array and 1 is 2. So if the second segment is not empty, the method should be set accordingly. So we say if method exists, then we get the object of that controller, and then we get that second segment. So what we did here is simple. If the second URL is not empty, then we check for that controller. If the controller does exist, then we assign the name of that method to match the method in that particular controller. So we now say this method, and then we offset it. So finally we extract any remaining segment of the URL, that is if it is more than 2 segments, because we say 0 is for controller, 1 is for the method. So if there are any other segments remaining, then we'll assign them as parameters. Also, if no additional segment exists, then we just assign the default parameter to home. So we say this params is equal to we count. So we count the URL, and then if it is greater than 0, sorry about that. So if it is greater than 0, then we return the remaining URLs. If it is not, then we'll return home. And Lastly, we will call the user func array, which carries this, and then the params. Now we are done with our routing. What we did here was simple. We stated that the application has a routing class called app, which serves as the main application controller and contains various properties. As we've seen, the properties up here, we have the controller, the method, and then the params, and they are responsible for handling incoming requests. And then we said the controller holds the default name home. The method also holds a default name index, while the params is set to be null initially, but can also hold an array of parameters extracted from the URL, as we have just seen. And then we also looked at the split URL method, which is a private function that extracts the URL parameters from the get superglobal variable, which streams any leading or trailing slashes and then sanitizes the URL and then splits it into an array using the / as a delimiter, as you can see right here, So we say the resulting array represents the different parts of the URL. So like we explained now, as we saw on the browser here. So these are the splitted URL. They are splitted here, and this is what they return. Then we also said that when the variable URL goes out and does not find anything, it should grab home and bring it back. Finally, we looked at the public method run. I would say it is the entry point of our application and is responsible for routing of the request to the respective or appropriate controllers, method, and then passing any parameters. Finally, we also look at the call user func array, which is a method that is used to call specified method within the controller. The controller object, and passing the parameters as an array. So next we are going to work on our controllers and then the view. So we'll create, let's go to app, then to controllers, and then before then we have to create our base controller. It is very important so that the controller classes can also extend to the base controllers. So to the base controller rather. So we create controller here, and then let's declare our PHP opening tag, and then we say class controller. Now this controller class is going to contain two methods, which are the view and then the model method, which are used to load the views and then the models respectively within our application. So let's see how we can achieve this. Let me just add some comments here. Let's say load view, and we have the parameter going to be a string. So the view method is going to have two params. So we have the first param is going to be a string, and then the second param is going to be an array, which is going to be called data. So let's create a public method, and then we'll call it view, and then we add our params, and then we say it's an array. So we say the view method accepts two parameters: name of the file to be loaded, which is a string, and then an optional parameter that contains data to be loaded in the view. So if the data parameter is an array, then the method uses an extract function to extract the array elements into individual variables. So let's see how we can achieve this. So we say if is underscore array, then we extract data. So let's extract. So then next we are going to locate the files where the view files are going to be picked from. So we say file name is equals to the view files are residing in the views folder. So we concatenate to dynamically pick up the names, and then we add extensions so that we don't have to add an extension when we are loading it in the controllers. So we have declared the variable, giving it the name and the location of our view files. So we say if the file exists, which is the file name, then let's require it. So this is that for the view. Next is going to be the model. Now let's add also some comments here. Load model, and then we have a params, which is a string, and then it's called model, which is going to be the class name, and then we have a public method called model, which has a parameter called model. Now where is the model located? So the file name is equal to model. It's located in the app directory. Inside of the app directory, you find them in the models directory, and then we concatenate. Models should also be treated like the controllers, because it's a class of its own, so it also has to be capitalized. So the first alphabet of the class name should be capital letter. So we say, we have seen it before, so we don't have to drag it much. So we say user first, then model, and then we concatenate and then add our extension, and then we close. So if the file exists, then we can go ahead and require that file. Now, having required the file, we can as well go ahead and return. If the file does exist and we require the file, we can now go ahead and instantiate the new object of the specified model class. So we say return new model. This last part isn't really important, though. You can leave it like this or like this, but I prefer like this. So else, if it's not found, then you return false. So we are now done with our base controller. Okay, let's see how we can view our project so far. So I think we are good to go with the views now. So let's create let's come here and create the base controller, which is home, which is the default controller rather, and then let's declare our PHP opening tag, and then our class name home, and then we say the default method is public is index, so we can say hello world. So if we return, okay, let's just echo, we say echo hello world. So no error for now, but return this view, and from our application structure we have a view that is called welcome. So let's add welcome here. We say it's a string, so let's make it a string, and then we close this. Now it's giving us an error already. So why is that? Because we are yet to extend the base controller. So once we have it, the error is gone. So we can now go to our view and then create our welcome.php, And then now if we refresh, we have a blank page. Okay. Let's let's check out where the error is coming from. Okay, so let's go back to our code editor, and what is it saying? The required once this file, no such file in directory, line 13 on bootstrap.php. What does bootstrap.php got to do with? Okay, it's loading all the classes in here. Okay, here it's supposed to be controller.php. So let's go back to home, and I think here we can also just say this view. Don't even have to return because it's already returned. And we have let's say h1, and they'll have PHP Mini framework tutorials, and then we can center this. We can say align at center, and let's refresh and see. Okay, it should be text. Good. So this is basically our framework. Well, let's take it a step further and see how we can work with our database. So okay, one more thing. We only have one controller, which is the home controller. So when we try to search to go to about, we get the page not found. This page not found is being triggered from here, page not found. So we can also create a 404 page and style it the way we want it, and we'll say not found. So now we have it right here. Okay, let's call the view. So say this view 404. Okay, we have to extend the controller, and then yeah, we're good. So you can style it to whatever the taste you prefer. So going on, next we are going to digress a little. Let's create something like a .env file, but this will look a bit different. So here we are going to create a config folder. Inside of the config folder, we are going to create a config file, and then this config file is going to hold a bit of information for us. So let's have some comments here. Let's say base URL, and then our base URL will have a function called base URL, and it's going to return HTTP if we're working with localhost, and then the name of our project folder is MVC framework. So, and then we end it. Now next we are going to work on our application configurations. So we copy and paste this, and then we'll have our app general configuration. Now I am going to do this in a way that you can add as many configs, file configs as possible. Encryption key, your PHP mailer credentials, your database credentials. You just add it to this file, and it's going to be dynamically called anywhere within your application. So let's see how we can achieve this. We use a super global called globus that has a value config, and it's equal to an array. So this is going to be an array of an array. So let's configure our database credentials. So we have configuration for database connection, and we say MySQL. We say it's an array of an array. So we are going to have another array, and then all of our MySQL credentials will be listed here. So we have DB name. Let's say, no, let's begin from the host, DB host. So we have it as a local host. Next is going to be DB user. Sorry about that. So we have DB user, and going to be root, and we have DB pass for password is going to be blank for me. If you have a password, you can put your password there. And DB name is going to be MVC. Let's give it MVC. Okay, MVC underscore framework, so that it tallies with our application name, right? And finally, we give it a char set. So we have DB underscore char set, and then we have UTF-8, and then let's prepare it for the next. So the next credentials when we are going to be adding will fall under this. Now, the next thing we are going to do is how to dynamically include these credentials to our projects. So let's first of all call it here. So we will load config, and then we require once we have config. So next we are going to create a config class in our core. So we have config.php. So we have our opening PHP tag, and then the class name config. So we begin with a public static method called get, which accepts an optional parameter called path, which represents the path to the desired configuration values. So we say we have a public static method called get that has an optional parameter, so it's going to be set to null. Now, if the path does exist, then we begin to retrieve the global configuration array stored in the global configs. So if the path does exist, we will get whatever that is contained here. So this is the path, and these are the values. So if it is being declared here, then we can be able to retrieve the content of this array. So we say if path, then config should be equal to the global's config, then path. Now we are going to split the path. So we say explode path. Now for each path as a bit, if it is set to config, then we return config, else we return false. So basically here we're saying that if the path does exist, or if it is provided, the method begins to retrieve the global configurations array stored in the global config, this global config here. Then the path string is splitted using the slash as the delimiter, the slash here. So, and then for each loops over with this class, we can be able to begin work with our credential values in our config files. So if we want to add another one, let's say we want to add let's say email, we can just say email, and then we have an array, and then within the array we have our values. So that is that. This will be for another topic entirely. So let's now take a look at how our database class is going to be structured. So let's create let's go to our core and create a database class. So we have database.php, and as usual, declaring our data our PHP opening tag. So the database class is going to provide method for interacting with our database using PDO, which stands for PHP data object. Our database class is also going to provide convenient and a reusable way of interacting with our database. Well, this class will also contain some private properties such as dbcon, which is short for DB database connection. Another property is going to be stmt, which is short for PDO statement. And then we have another property that we'll name database, which will be a singleton instance of the database class. So let's start building our database class. So we have database, and then our database will have the following property. So we have a private property here called the dbcon, and then it's set to be null. And we have another private property which we say is the stmt rather, which is also set to be null. And then we have our database. It's going to be a private static property, and it's also going to be null. So next, we'll create a constructor method, which is called when a new instance of the database class is created. So we say public method construct. So we therefore say this dbcon is equal to new pdl mysql db name is equal to config get mysql slash db name, db underscore name, and then you concatenate again, and then we have the host. I'm being very careful here, I don't want to make a mistake. Config get mysql slash db host, then charcert is equal to config and get mysql db charcert, db underscore charcert. Next is the config mysql slash db user, and then next is db pass. So we have config get mysql slash db underscore pass. So we have dynamically called all of our db credentials, and we say this dbcon set attributes, and this error mode and PDO exception. Now we'll create an instance of the database class. So let's do that. So we have a public static method called let's say public static method called let's say open db. This is to open the connections. So the OpenDB static method implements the singleton pattern. It ensures only one instance of the database class is created and return that instance. So we say if self database is null, then we should create a new instance. Else, let's return that. Now that we have opened the connection, let's try to close it. Then self db is equal to null. Sorry, it ought to be in here. Then self db. So now let's prepare a query, an SQL query statement for execution. We'll say let's say public method prepare, then it has a parameter query, and we'll say this stmt equal to this dbcon prepare. So this prepare method prepares an SQL query for execution and assign a statement object to the stmt property. So Basically, this is how you can connect your DB credentials to your DB class dynamically. So overall, it's reflecting on all the pages within your application as it stands. So we'll just go ahead and paste some other functions or methods in within our database class, where you can as well read more, make your research, and then improve on this. So the next class we are going to look at before we dive into creating a project using this framework is going to be the request class. So we create a new file called request.php, and we will have our PHP opening tag and the class name. Say it is request. Now this class is going to have two properties, two public properties. We have one to be data, which is an array, and then the second is going to be query, which is also an array. So let's have a constructor. So for a safer and better access to our data property, we say the data method is used to safely and conveniently access data value in the data property. So let's have a public method called data, and it has a parameter called key. So this method is going to return an array key if it exists. So we have the array key, and then we have the property here. So if this array key isn't empty, then let it fetch what is being contained within the parameter. So we say this data, then array, we have the key value. So if the array contains a range of data, then it is grabbed. If not, then it returns a null. Similarly to the data method, the query method also provides access to the value stored in the query property, and it takes a string key as a parameter, checks if it exists in the query array, and then return it. Otherwise, it's also going to return a null. So we can safely say copy this and then paste, and then change just a few lines. So here we have data, place it as some query. So that is that. Next, we are going to check if our request method is either a post or it's a get, especially when we usually use post if we want to insert information into our database, and then we use a get to query a particular application. Let's say, for instance, we want to search on we want to do a search on our application. The get method is very, very important when it comes to that. So we say here is a method we called is post. So this method is also going to return server, and then the request underscore method. So if it is equal to post, let's make it caps, then it returns true. Otherwise, it returns false. Then we can as well copy this and paste, and then change this to get, and here also to be get. So with this, we are good to begin work on our mini project. So one more thing, we need to create another file for redirecting, because definitely when we have successfully inserted information into our database, we should be able to tell our application where to go from there. So for our redirect class, we just come here and then create a new file, which we call redirect.php. And as usual, start with opening our PHP tag. Then the class is redirect, and then we say public. The method is going to be public function, then 2. So this is where it will go to after it is successful. So we have this method has a parameter called location, so it will hold the header, and then we have a location, then our base URL, we concatenate that, and then add this, and then we concatenate and then add the location. The next is the back. So this takes us back from where we are coming from. So we say header, location, server, HTTP referral. So with this, we are definitely good to go. I think we're missing one, the closing parenthesis there. So I think with this, we are now good to go. So now to begin working on our project, on our code, let's go back to the home controller, and then we add a property called public. We say request, and this request, we say it should be request equal to null. So come down here and say this request is equal to the request in our constructor. If not null, then we should return that request, else we should create a new instance of our request. Again, we have another property we called redirect, and for the redirect, we say this redirect to give us a new instance of our redirect. So now I will go back to my views, and okay, let me go to the public folder and then create another folder there, which I'll call my assets. Then I will go ahead and then add that. So I've added my Bootstrap, CSS, and JavaScript. So now I will just go to my views. Here's my view, and then introduce my CSS and JavaScript. So we have a link, and it's called Bootstrap, the CSS. But first we have to add our base URL, and the location is in public, and assets, then CSS before the file. So let's go back to our view and see if the file is already added. So when we try to refresh this, and we're hit with an error, so I can see it's a spelling mistake. It's supposed to be redirect. The E is missing there. So let's go to redirect. I think it's from the class, so it's E here. So let's refresh now and see. Okay, another mistake here. So let's refresh now. All right, our Bootstrap CSS is now fully connected, and it's working perfectly. So this is how we linked up our Bootstrap. If we now take a look at our source code, we will see our full URL. Then we will see the folder where the CSS resides. Next, we are going to create a form. After the form, then we are going to create a table where our input will be displayed. So let's get to it. So let's come underneath here and say div row, and then we have a div and then a column. Give it full width, and we can now put it in a card. So we say div and then card, and then we have the card body or the header. Is it header or head? Then we have our h5, say user form. Say it will be card header, I think, and then here will be div and then the card body. So we're going to have our form here. Form is going to be a post form, and then we are going to have our input, and it's going to have a class of form control, and it's going to have a name, and then we can copy this, or let's say username, or let's leave it that way, name, and then email. Okay, to make it look nice, let's put it in a div. So let's say this row, and we have div column 6, or let's say 12, or let's give it just a dynamic column, and then we paste this, then we copy and then paste to duplicate. Here we have email, and finally we have our button. So we have a submit button, and then we have submit. I was thinking of the name to give it. Let's take a look at our form. Okay, so this is our form. Let's make it it should be 6, so we can offset 3 in large screen on both sides. So, and also we can add a bit of style here. Now after applying these styles, we have added a few CSS. So we now have our button to be blue. So once we add this and we click on submit, we'll be able to add our information to the database. So let's add an action. So the action class is going to be home. So we say base URL / home, because that is our controller. So this is where we'll be performing our CRUD, or we'll be inserting our data. I am hoping to do a separate video for CRUD using this very same framework. So I'll only just insert data, and then just to show us that everything is okay, everything is working perfectly. So let's get started. So we say if, we begin with an if this request is post, then we should say name is equal to this request data, then we have a name there. Next we have the email, and then we say this request data email. Now to insert this into our database, we will say insert this, what is the model, user model, then add. We are here to create this, and then we have name, and then we have the email. Then we say, so if not inserted, then we should echo let's say data not inserted, else let's echo or return and echo almost the same in this regard, data inserted successfully. Then we redirect. So we say to redirect, we say this redirect to, then we add our location string. So we say home. Here we can also redirect. So now let's go ahead and create the add method in our model. So we can just copy this and head over to our model, and then public function when we add that, and then we say query. Remember, in our database we will define our prepare statements to always prepare a query parameters. So we say query will be equal to our SQL statement. So we have insert into our table is users, and then we have the values. So we have name, which is our first parameter there. Then we have the email, and then we have name, and then we have email. Next we are going to prepare our statement. So we say this db, then prepare, then we prepare our query. Next we are going to bind. So we say this db bind the value of name to parameter name. Then we just copy this and paste one more time, and then we have email, and then email. Then finally we are going to execute this. So we say db execute. So I think we are good to go. So let's head back to our browser. Let me do it with the source code, and create our table called users. So table name will be users, and then we'll have just 3 columns. So we have the ID, which is an integer, and will be auto incremented, and then we have name, going to be a voucher. Let's give it a length of 100, and then we have the email, also vouchered, also length of 100, and we save. So it seems our table is now ready for use. Let's start inserting. Let's cancel this, and then so we say admin, and then we have admin email. Let's see, column. So a quick one, I have added some code here. This is to match the data. So this is what I just wanted to bring your attention to, but you will have everything in the downloaded file, so do not worry. Then finally let's go test our application and try to insert. Let's see. Hope we are not okay. Also, since we are not using sessions, this may not be required, so we only confirm by checking in our database. So let's go insert and see what we've got. Let's refresh this. Then we have let's say admin, and admin at admin.com. We don't have an error. Let's go check our database, and then we have admin and admin. So let's add another one. Let's say user, and then user at user.com, and then also no error. When we refresh, we have it there. So this is how you can impute on information into the database using this particular framework, in which we try to make it look like the standard framework or the bigger or the mega frameworks that are in town. So let's see how we can get to display our inserted datas. So we say let's give it variables 3 names, and then we say this user model, and then let's say get users or get all users. Now let's go back to our model and create this. So we say public function, then get all users. So we say we go to our database. Okay, we already copied that, and we head back to our model, and then we say this db that. So we now replace this with the name of the table, and so we say users, and then we have let's say, okay, let's say this. First off, let's go ahead and then see what we have. From there we'll understand better and then take it step by step. So let's go back to home, and then we include this as an array. So we say data, and then we have these names. So we say names is name, and then we now include that here. So let's go to our welcome page and then see how we can call this. So we now say let's create a div and then give it a class text center. So we say h3 users. Let's take a look and see. Okay, and then let's add a margin top here, sorry, a pattern top. So let's give it 5 just to shift it away from the table, then from the form rather. Then let's add a list. Don't want to use a table, so say this. So we have the name, first name, and email, then the email. So let's see how it's going to look like. All right, so now we can go ahead. So we now say let's say for instance, and give it whatever name you want. Let's say people is equal to this db. Now we shall, let's go to our database to fetch an associative. We now say that. So we now return. So in our welcome, so we come up here and check if what we have gotten is an array. So we say if is array, which is the names, because here we say we call it names. So if it's a name, if names is an array and it is greater than 0, so we count and see if it is greater than 0, then we continue. Then here we say we'll come down here. Okay, first and foremost, let's go down and end if before we forget. So we end if. So now we come here and then we say for each, let's not forget our opening tag. So for each names as let's just say row, let's close that, and then here we are going to end for each. So we say end for each. So if we refresh, we are going to have 3 items because we already have 3 items here. So we added the names for each, and well, this is set. I didn't even know my system has stopped, my screen has stopped recording, so, and I'm not ready to go back to restart, so I'll just go ahead and explain. So like we already did, we checked if it's an array, and then we counted if it is greater than 0. Now we echo the for each. We checked for each as a row, and then we have also added a receptionist to the list. So we can also add a cleaner, and then we say clean at admin.com. Okay, so we have the cleaner down here. So guys, I guess this is where we call it today. I'll be doing a special video for CRUD where we can create, we can read, we can update, and we can delete. And I'm going to add a lot of other features, like we have not even talked about the session, so we have not even talked about the CSFR, and we are going to also build a secure login systems with session. So there are a lot of things we can do with this small but powerful framework that we have created. And we are going to build a lot of other projects with this, be it a blog, be it e-commerce, a host of a lot of things. So please stay subscribed. Thank you, and you remain blessed.